Hello bass family and welcome to Everything Bass. So we're starting the modes series, and some people refer to them as the church modes, major key modes, but generally I'm just going to refer to them as the modes because there are other modes that we'll get into in future videos. So these are modes built off of major keys, and if you this is the first video you've seen, you may want to jump back and see the intro to the modes where I give a little bit of a background on how the modes are made. But this will be a shorter video because the first mode is Ionian, and Ionian is actually the major scale. So if you've already studied the major scale, you know the major scale, maybe you've seen my video on the major scale, you're familiar with it. All I can say is it's important for us to be able to play, to get the most out of this entire series. You should be able to play the major scale off of any root on your bass. And right now, 1 octave is the bare minimum, but if you want to get more out of it, I would say, watch this video to its entirety and then go through the series I did called Things to Do with Scales. And it'll give you a bunch of exercises you can apply to any scale. And that'd be a great thing to do after every video I put up for the modes. So today I'm doing Ionian, you may want to go back. So some people get confused. Well, why don't they just call it the major scale? Why don't you call it Ionian? The simplest thing I can tell you to maybe get you beyond that question is just as if you had a friend growing up named Bobby, and then at graduation they announced his name as Robert. Same guy, one's a more formal name and one's a more casual name. Ionian is a more formal name of the scale. It also right away when you use the term Ionian, you convey to someone that you're talking about, you're going to be talking modally. Whereas, commonly talking with your band and stuff, you're chatting, most people just refer to it as the major scale. So, just quickly, a C major scale, C Ionian looks like this. So as I've said before, but since this is going to be a short video, I'm just going to mention that, when you are learning, if you don't have the time to go through all the things to do with scales, the first thing you should do is if you learn it C, take it up to the 8th fret, play it up here. Take it up here to the 15th fret, and be able to play it in those 3 ranges. Now, once you can do that comfortably, pick a different root every day. I suggest, just to be orderly and organized, is go through the circle of fifths, and just, so you don't forget anything. So the next day do G, which has 1 sharp, play that, find a G higher, find a G higher. That's a lot of valuable work. If it seems monotonous, it really takes very little time. And once you get through the learning curve, you'll find that you'll be able to do this kind of review in just a couple minutes. And that's kind of why I created the Things to Do with Scales, which partners really well with this. Okay, so that's Ionian. Now, the following 6 lessons on this topic, the 6 modes that I'll be showing you after Ionian, the videos will be longer because chances are some of them will be brand new to you, and I'll be discussing a little bit more usage. And I should go back. I know that I covered this in previous videos, but remember the Ionian goes well over the major triads, major 7 chords. There's more advanced usage. But if this is your first foray into the modes, I'm going to be very, give you the most common usage. And that is major triads and major 7 chords. Ionian is a good mode to use. Okay, guys, now we're going to move on to the Encore Item, which is one of my favorites. I say that a lot, but sue me, I love music. Okay, so we're going to go on to a band called Steely Dan. And if you've heard about Steely Dan, or maybe you haven't heard about Steely Dan and you want to check them out, one of the great places to start is the album I'm chosen today, which is A Decade of Steely Dan. This is a greatest hits compilation, and it's pretty amazing. There's a lot of songs that even if you've never followed the band, but you've listened to, you've watched movies, you've probably heard a couple of them. One of the songs that I've heard in several soundtracks or used during several movies is Reelin' in the Years, which is a great song. I love that kind of gnarly guitar tone that's used at the beginning. Now, I'm just going to kind of hit a couple songs here. Do It Again, Reelin' in the Years, Deacon Blues, love that tune. Ricky, Don't Lose My Number, cool kind of feel in that groove. Songs like that. The bass player was actually Walter Becker. Amazing guy. And I was kind of shocked when I was doing early research on Steely Dan of how many of the big hits Walter played bass on. And he's great. So also he's great because, man, these chords are really, you know, if you look at a really accurate transcription of a Steely Dan song, look at the chords. There's not a lot of common triads in there. There's a lot of extensions, a lot of great movement, a lot of slash chords that I find really compelling. And to hear how Walter created a bass line around that is brilliant. Now, on this album, there's a song called Peg, and that actually features one of our founding fathers, one of the guys that's just so influential. His name's Chuck Rainey. Chuck Rainey, I've been blessed to meet on several occasions. He's so generous with his time. He's so he shares wonderful stories. And you know, those of you who've been able to sit and chat with him know exactly what I mean. And those of you who haven't, it'd be, you know, I just hope that someday you get the chance to talk with Chuck. Chuck Rainey, amazing player, man, amazing. This is such a cool vibe and such a cool way he treats with the chorus on the song. So, you know, of course, listen to all the songs, listen to how the bass is constructed, but you know, but give Peg a special listen and hear what Chuck's done on that. Steely Dan, it's funny. When you know, now that I'm 54 years old, I've met so many musicians and stayed in touch with them on their journey from when they first start the bass and then they get more involved. And there's always this evolution, well, not always. Many times I see bass players as they get more accomplished, they get into progressive music. They'll get into like Rush, Yes, things like that. And then as they push farther, they'll get into you know, jazz studies and start really getting into jazz. And at one point, I see him always go into Steely Dan. And I did too. And it was after I was a student at MI. And just we had a Steely Dan LPW. And working through that and finding these great songs that were being kind of shown to me for the first time, I became addicted and I became a huge fan of Steely Dan. So, so give it a listen. You know, follow on the path of maybe the bass players that come before you, and just give it a listen, see what you think. I love the vibe. I love Donald Fagen. I think the songs are really great. And I mean, it's funny. I'm always drawn to him when I'm in a certain mood, and I think you might find the same thing if you give him a chance. But Walter Becker, Chuck Rainey, great album to start with, A Decade of Steely Dan. I give it a high recommendation, and I hope you guys like it. Once you listen to it, as with any of the things I suggest to you in the Encore items, let me know what you think in the comments below. And definitely, I'd love to get a kind of cool thread going on below about you know, what Steely Dan album you like, what are some of the songs you like. I just limited myself to songs that are on this album, but there are, believe me, so many great songs out there, and more Chuck Rainey tunes that'll just blow your way. Okay, so we got the first mode, Ionian, and we've got A Decade of Steely Dan. Thank you guys so much for checking this out, and I will see you at the next video.